Hello again, Struckpub. Today I'm bringing you my first video for Whoop Hero, and this would be my first impressions, which ended up being a very extensive in-depth overview of the game, so it can even double down as user's guide, as a beginner's guide. Keep in mind it's long, but there's chapters, there's timestamps in the description, or you can use the scroll bar to only click on the things you care about, you want to know about. I'd rather not split it into two videos and make it one longer video and let people decide which parts of the video they want to watch. Without further ado, let's start by talking about what is Whoop Hero. So what is Whoop Hero? Whoop Hero is 2D pixel art, beautiful pixel art, at least for me. I really love it. Little game that's kind of a mixture between an idle game, an RPG, city planning, kind of a turn-based combat. I mean, it has so many things. It's a unique thing in its own. There isn't another such game on the market as Whoop Hero, because it has just so many different elements that other games have on them, mixed into a fusion of all those. So yeah, you have the idle mechanic, you have the whoop mechanic, which is something I've not seen before in the way it's done here. You have the card deck building, and you place those things, and then you have the boss summoning mechanic, and the combat is kind of turn-based, but it's automated. You can't control the combat yourself, other than getting items that give you certain stats and getting traits that give you certain procs and effects and stuff like that. But your hero does the fighting, your hero does the walking. You can just pause it, or you can just let it do its own thing, and you just change the items you get, and you just place land, place tiles. But then there's the city building, where you have your camp, where you build all those buildings that make certain improvements, that give your hero bonuses, that unlock new classes, that give you extra inventory slots, that give you extra HP and all sorts of things, even buildings that can help you with attacking enemies in combat from afar. So there's this kind of second part of the game where it's kind of the behind the scenes thing, and I really enjoy that. It's just so unique that most people probably would be very baffled, and there's gonna be a steep learning curve for some people until they learn how things work. But yeah, it's gonna be the game that's gonna have a specific type of players that really love it, and other type of players that it's just not their kind of game, and that's fine. Games like those are niche games. They are aimed towards a niche group of people that enjoyed that type of playstyle, the uniqueness of it all, and I kind of enjoyed. I think I belong to that kind of group of people who love that playstyle. Not everyone would love it, and that's kind of something to keep in mind. And here we are at the expedition screen where you start your fight. So there are three crucial choices you have to make. First of all is the class. You start with the warrior and eventually unlock a rogue by building one specific thing, which is this thing, the refugee, and then you build a crypt to unlock the necromancer if you want to start with the necromancer. Each hero starts with a default 4 pieces of equipment, different for each class. The necro is 2 rings, amulet and a tome, which is the main hand weapon. The rogue has 2 main hand weapons, chest armor and boots, and the warrior has a shield, a main hand weapon, a ring and an armor piece. But then when you use the arsenal, he gets a helmet as well. The necro gets a shield as well, and the rogue, I'm not sure because I still haven't played a rogue with an arsenal, but we can find out in a moment. And it would say starts with warrior's gear for each of those, because I have a building that gives me warrior's gear, but maybe if I upgrade it, each class might start getting better equipment when they start. The next thing you select is your act. You can see on Act 1 the enemies are easier because they have between 0 and 1 abilities. Act 2 is 0 and 2. The enemy strength is reduced here it's 0%, here 2% growth per whoop, 3% growth per whoop. Here is bonus resources 40%, here it isn't, there isn't. Max resources number 10, max resources number 20. Yeah, there's additional quest stats, obviously, and that are different, as you can see, quest specific stats, and so on. But the next thing you need to select is cards. What cards do you want and how many? You're gonna have a limit of 12 at first, I think, or was it less? But at one point you're gonna have 12 cards, and then eventually those 12 cards would go to 15 cards in your deck. And then there's golden cards like those here, and you can have only one golden card per deck. I've unlocked the crypt that can resurrect you, or I can get the arsenal that gives me an extra item slot, but with lowered quality, and I really love this one. I really love this thing. You've got cards, special cards like Oblivion, Beacon, Storm Temple, Treasury, then Meadow, Desert, Forest Rock, which are the land placement cards, kind of thing. Then you've got cards like that spawn enemies like Spire Cocoon, Cemetery, Vampire Mansion, Grove, Swamp, Ruins. Then the Battlefield as well, which also spawns a chest, not just enemies. Then there's Village, which is pretty good. Wheatfield, that upgrades the village. Then Blood Grove, which is kind of placed near a forest adjacent to the road, like a grove or this forest. It kind of can upgrade the grove. And then there's Ruins, which I mentioned spawns enemies, but it's very weird because the enemies that spawn on Ruins can join adjacent tile battle. So if you're fighting on a tile next to the ruin, the worms in the ruin would attack you with ranged attacks, so a very special one. Then there's the buffing card, Road Lantern, and another buffing card would be the Beacon, which you can see this decreases the maximum number of monsters, but in certain cases you might not want to decrease the maximum number of monsters, although you can stack multiple lanterns. So let's say you want this part of the map to have decreased number of monsters, then another one to have increased, so you can start farming those, which only drop from enemies that you are fighting 4 or more enemies at the same time. And then there's Chrono Crystal, which is pretty interesting. You have to put certain things with a day's passing effect. And the way I think it works is if you put a meadow next to it, the meadow gets boosted, gets double the effect. And the upgraded meadow, that's 3 instead of 2 HP healed. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. In Treasury you have to put cards next to it, and then if you consider rock and mountains, there's a certain way of getting 9 rock mountain cards next to each other to build a big mountain. You can only have one big mountain per run, but that's pretty much kind of how the deck is. And when you start, when you go into the battle, when you selected your deck, it starts. And now we're going to talk about the expedition mechanics. What is there to know? Well, first of all, your hero keeps moving and fighting on their own, and he's stuck in some whoops. He's getting into those whoops. The enemies are getting stronger as you're whooping through. The combat is auto combat, more about the combat in a moment. And as you see, I'm fighting enemies and then things are dropping. This is, by the way, the arsenal that unlocked the boots for us, though it unlocked the amulet for us. And you're getting certain cards to drop, and you can see we got a ticket and a forest. Well, the ticket is an upgraded forest, which can randomly drop. Then we got a village I can place here, and the hero, we can just let it fight. It keeps running into the whoops, encountering auto fighting enemies. You can just pause it, you can make it 1 time the speed, 2 times the speed, and as you fight, certain items will drop. But the rogue is different. With the rogue you don't get item drops, you get trophies, and then you exchange the trophies once you pass the camp. Whereas with other heroes, every kill has a chance to drop you items. You still get resources as drops before passing the turn, before making a whoop. You can see right now I'm at whoop number 1 and the enemy level is 1. In a moment right now we got to enemy level 2. We passed the whoop point, and now we can get some extra magic HP. We can get extra items equipped that make us stronger, and that's kind of how it is. And now we're back to 0 trophies, and we keep getting trophies. And you can start placing certain buildings to spawn more enemies, like for example a vampire here if you want it, and all sorts of things. Now in the combat you can see it's fighting on its own, and you can hover on an enemy, you can see your stats on this side, and those stats are a major deciding factor how the combat will go, because there's things like vampirism, like attack speed increase, like evasion, like counter, damage to all, retaliation, and the rogue has crit chance and crit damage which other heroes don't. The necro has chance to the necro summons skeletons, and you have items that increase the maximum number of skeletons. There's all sorts of stats. Some classes have some stats that others don't, and that's amazing, because you have some weird mechanics, such as for example a trait that lets you counter on evasion on the warrior, then another trait that lets you heal on counter, and having this combo is amazing. If you stack a lot of evasion, and then maybe stack some extra vampirism to help with the with the heal, or stack extra damage to all and things like that. There are just so many things, so many possibilities to build one hero, that it just a lot of variety there in terms of combat. And the whoops are just simple. Your hero reaches here, new whoop starts, he heals, and the enemies get stronger. The items that drop from them get stronger, and the camp starts healing for more on the next whoop. And other things are also whoop related. There are certain artifacts that give you extra boost based on the current whoop level or stuff like that. So as you're fighting, as you're passing certain tiles, you're gonna get certain resources. There's a limit of how many resources you can take per expedition, not per whoop, per expedition. There's also a trait that allows you to take 50% more. So as you keep collecting small resources, they keep building into bigger ones, and those bigger ones attack 1 are capped at 10, attack 2 at 20, and it just would keep growing. You can see as I'm killing enemies, they're dropping items and I can equip them. If I don't equip them, they're just gonna keep filling up, and if I reach a full inventory of items over here, the item that's here disappears to make room for the one that comes here, and if I get 3 items and I'm already full, those 3 items here would disappear and I would get those new items over here. Then this one is 3 affixes, and then the orange one, which I guess might be called legendary, has 4 affixes. And also the level up, as the items level up, they keep giving you stronger affix rows. So in certain cases you might want to replace a legendary level 2 item with a white or blue level 5 item, because it gives you much more damage or much more other stats that you might need, like an evasion for example. And there are all sorts of things you can do with cards. So there's cards that are lands that kind of give you some bonuses or debuff the monsters, or there's cards that spawn monsters, and there's cards that buff you or debuff you, but in general there's one thing to know about them that's very important. As you're putting those cards, you're getting, as you can see, this thing increases, and you don't have to just put cards here, you can put cards over here as well, and each card you place gets the boss closer to spawning. When this reaches the end, the boss spawns and you have to fight it. And then there's things like this treasury, where you kind of need to put certain things next to each other to build it, and then it gives you resources and some wood. And then you might want to save the treasury for later. Let's say I don't feel that final thing I placed or maybe it was this one. One of those things I don't place around it, and I wait for when I think I need a wood boost, and I use it then. Then there's things like building mountains by stacking mountain or rock tiles in a 3x3 grid. So 9, so if I place rock here, 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 and here, in those 9 slots, rocks and mountains. It doesn't matter what order you place them on. We're gonna take this mountain, put it here, and as I mentioned, boom, we get a big mountain. You can have only one of those big mountains per expedition. So no matter how many times you whoop, you won't be able to get another one built. As you kill enemies, you get XP, and once you reach a threshold, you get a trait point. You can see what happens now. I leveled up, and here's that point, and that's what I wanted to talk about. There are all sorts of traits. See this one, 1.5 damage for every potion used, and you can increase the number of potions with certain artifacts. More about artifacts later. And see the resource cap, I can increase by 50% with this trait, or I can get 3 new sets of traits without this spending my point. This is not always the case. It's random which 3 you get. If you get this one, it's nice, gives you another chance. See Article of Protection. After receiving this effect and after every whoop, the hero receives a bar of phantom protection. This is pretty interesting. So there's all sorts of different things that modify the combat, and you can see now I have that protection. That's gonna appear after every whoop to give us a chance to be a little bit stronger at the beginning. And here is for example some traits on the rogue. 3 of those that you can select, which are pretty interesting. So the hero receives less damage for every enemy starting after the second enemy. Then every 10% lost HP gives you a 0.5% chance to instantly deal 1000 damage, and then 0.5 times whoop HP after an adjacent road side tile while passing a tile. Which is, yeah, as you can see, extra healing, it's not so bad. But yeah, there's much better traits you could get. Those are just an example. And here are some of the necro traits, just to give you kind of an idea of what things to expect. Obviously that's a very small part of the traits you can get on a necro. Now let's say a few more words about boss fights. As you heard, you unlock the boss by putting enough guards, and once you reach that threshold, this happens. It spawns the boss on a specific tile on the map, and around it, it spawns some palaces. And you can use Oblivion on those palaces. Here's a pro tip. Use Oblivion, remove the palaces, weaken the boss. And if you're strong enough when you summon the boss, you wouldn't have a problem in beating it. And when you beat it, you're gonna have a choice of some permanent rewards for this whoop, for this not whoop, for this expedition, and they would apply until you leave the expedition, and they won't be there after you leave. So you're gonna see what I got here, those 3 things. And there's a resources assortment as well as an option, so you can take some extra resources if you want to, if you don't want one of those other bonuses. And yeah, once you select one, you can just keep playing, keep grinding, keep farming, or you can just leave. And then if you don't beat the boss, and by the way, by beating the boss you get one of those skulls, and if you have 2 skulls, once you die, if you don't beat the boss, or if you die from anything else that's not the boss, you can use those skulls to get all your items, all your resources, even though you died. So you're not gonna get 60, you're gonna get 100%, as you're seeing. There is one more card I'd like to talk about, and that's the village card and the quests it gives. So this is a village, and this is a village card. If you pass by it, you heal, as I mentioned earlier. This is also a village. Every time you pass a village, you get a quest, which makes a monster, random monster on the map after the village, in the whoop, boosted stronger by 200% extra HP. And in this case, I passed through this village, it made this goblin stronger. So let's pass through this village, let's clear it out, unless they kill me. And see which enemy will get stronger and will be the next quest target. And you just have to kill that target to get extra wood, extra rewards. So we passed that village and it made this scarecrow the next target, and now the target, you can see quest goal 200% extra HP, which makes things a bit more difficult, but you beat it and you then get rewards. And that was very perfect that it's showing us the monster for the quest right after. You can see I beat it and it now gave me the quest rewards, some extra rings and stuff, actually 2 rings, and that's how quests are done. And you have to unlock the village from crafting certain buildings in your outpost, in your camp. Here we are at the village, at the camp, where we can build all sorts of structures. You can go to build and you can see there's all sorts of buildings we can make. You start with the campfire, and then after you build that, you have options to a field kitchen, herbalist hut, smithy. Then building the smithy unlocks the smelter and is needed for the supply depot. The herbalist hut unlocks the farm and it's also needed for the gymnasium. The field kitchen unlocks the refugee where you get the rogue unlocked, and it also is needed for the gymnasium. And the gymnasium unlocks things like the cemetery, and it's also needed for the supply depot. And the cemetery unlocks the crypt. The supply depot is needed for unlocks the mud hut and is needed for the warehouse and the intel center. And then the intel center lets you do watchtower, it lets you do river, library, forest, and then library goes into alchemist tent, river goes into bridge, forest can lead into camp or lumberjack. So there's all sorts of things to discover, to get, and each one of those, not each but most of those, would unlock a new card for your deck, as well as a certain mechanic that helps one way or another. Intel center is pretty solid, supply depot is pretty solid and needed. For example, for the rogue you wanna unlock that refugee, but for the necro you need to rush the cemetery so you can get crypt built. And the necro is very fun. There are very few things that counter a well-built necro, and there are some traits that can hurt a well-built necro. For example, if you take a trait that lets the damage you take get spread out throughout your summons, and then you encounter those evading rogues, you might end up hurting yourself because they're gonna be AoEing your summons and destroying them super quickly. But without that trait, your summons would be much more useful and would survive for longer. Because those rogues, they keep evading and they're a very hard counter if you take that trait that spreads out the damage. So you can see here I can build the forest, and let's just build it and show you. So it normally gives you different places where you can put different things, and there's different mechanic for what happens when you place each one. But let's put the forest here. And now there's some dialogue. Wow, it's a forest. Yep, a forest. Solid wood. It's really unbelievable. I'm not gonna do any intonation or anything, just gonna read it. Yeah, I get it. I know what a forest is. And those dialogues are throughout the whole game. I don't want to spoil too much, so I'm only showing you this type of story dialogue. But there's some all sorts of dialogue. So for the first time when you build a new building, for the first time when you encounter a new enemy and a new boss, there's going to be some dialogue. In fact, there's some very fun dialogues, without spoiling them, for when you're fighting the Lich boss the very first X times. It's all different dialogue, and eventually it starts whooping the same dialogue. And basically each building serves its purpose, and you can upgrade buildings and they're gonna give you extra slots. Upgrading each thing would give you certain slots. This gives you furniture slot, it gives you jewelry slot, and it gives you an extra slot in the inventory. So upgrading this would be pretty useful, upgrading the gymnasium, so you can have extra gear slots. And as you've seen how the gear slots are, each hero has 4 by default, with Arsenal 1 more. And eventually, as you keep unlocking the gymnasium, you're gonna upgrade the gymnasium, you're gonna get more of those unlocked. And there's 2 slots in the inventory, this thing, the gauntlet, and another one that are kind of they look broken, but they still kind of get unlocked because the necro gets 2 rings and an amulet and a tome. and then with darts now it gets a shield, and maybe with upgraded gymnasium it's gonna get boots or armor or helmets, we'll see, or gauntlets. We'll see what which hero gets once I keep on walking, but that's kind of some of the things, and each building can get upgraded to give you certain things as unlocks. And yeah, keep looking at what you want to upgrade first, but my suggestion would be really try to rush the class you want to play. Like for example, if you want to play Necro, rush the Crypt, then get the supply depot into center as soon as you can. And after that, maybe start saving for a warehouse, start saving those Orb of Expansion nodes, because they are very, very helpful. So now, what are artifacts? Artifacts are items that you unlock by building the supply depot. Once you build the supply depot, it allows you to find useful artifacts for your people, and then those artifacts you put into the supply depot. And you start with, as you can see, I've got 4 and 3 and 4 8 slots, and you can then build the storage that gives you extra 10 slots unlocked over here, that warehouse, and then you can get another 10 slots, so you can unlock a total of 20 slots. So basically that should unlock all the slots, all those 18 slots with those 20 extra slots should get unlocked. And maybe eventually they might increase those slots by allowing us to craft more, but I guess for now we don't need as much. And artifacts you find and they give you buff while you wear them throughout your whoop. Once you finish the whoop, you can take those artifacts. If you die, you can't take them back unless you have a certain resource that you get when killing a boss. If you have this one, Orb of Immortality, you get those by killing chapter bosses. And if you have 2 of those, you can take the items, even if you die, you can take all of them. Otherwise, you take 60% of the items when you die, which means you don't take the artifacts at all, because they can be divided. These are some of the artifacts you can unlock. I haven't unlocked them all, but these are some of those you could find. And since you have a limited number of ones, you decide how many of which type you put in your supply. So if I remove 1 food item, I can try and put another 2 item, but then I won't be able to put 1 more food item. So it's kind of how it goes. You decide what to put in which slot, but you have a limited number of slots, so use them well. You can craft items as well. You can craft food items, or you can craft regular ones. It's randomly gonna give you one. I'm not gonna do it now to waste the resources, but you can also dismantle. I can show you how you can dismantle food. Dismantling different items gives different resources. So one tip I can give to some people, if you wanna push through the building quicker, building a warehouse quicker, try to dismantle artifacts that give you this thing, Orb of Expansion, because this is one of the hardest things to get. Or Orb of Expansion, because you need to fight 4 or 5 or more enemies in a tile. So it needs to be 4 or more enemies in a tile, as this thing says here. So try to dismantle some of those, get your buildings first, and then start worrying about stacking up more artifacts later on. And when you build the Intel Center, this unlocks the Encyclopedia, where you have information about all sorts of things. You have all sorts of information about the tile placement cards. All the cards are here. If you haven't unlocked the card, it's not gonna show up. Then you have some information about all the enemies, such as what resources you get from that enemy, or could get, what abilities they can use. Detailed description of it, you have a picture of it, you have what it classifies as, whether it's undead or an object or living or has a soul, and things like that. It could be a swarm, it could be a cosmic enemy, it could be a vampire. There's all sorts of classifications. So there's artificial life as well, and yeah, it's pretty good and useful. And if you want to spoil yourself, there's dialogues for the bosses. I'm not gonna click on them, but there's the first, second, third meeting when you meet it and what the dialogue is there. Then there's first, second and third skill. I'm not gonna spoil those for you. Some resources you can get and all sorts of stuff. And that's gonna be for all bosses. And you can see there are 6 bosses in here that you can check. So most likely, since there's Act 1 and 2 and probably Act 3, maybe there's gonna be more bosses in each act, but so far I haven't found more than 1 boss in Act 1 and Act 2. There's information about all resources. Clicking on each would give you information regarding what that resource is, how to get it, which is very important. That's why I'm clicking all of them, so you can pause if you want to. And then there's information, as I mentioned, about each artifact, what it does, each artifact you've encountered. Eventually you're gonna unlock them all and get certain achievements, certain trophies for that. And that's pretty much it about the encyclopedia. I didn't know it exists, and I was wondering what the hell, why isn't there an encyclopedia? Why don't I know what this thing is called when I don't have it? When I look at the crafting, when I look at the building, and I hover here, it doesn't tell me what this is called. And I was wondering, how do I make this? How do I get this? Eventually, I got the Intel Center and I got the encyclopedia, and at least now I know what's what. Now I'm gonna try to list some pros and cons. One thing that's either a pro or a con depending on your preferences, the graphics, the 8-bit, 16-bit pixel art. That's for me a pro, for others it might be a con. The sounds are very retro, another thing that could be either something that you like or you don't. I like it, it reminds me of the 80s era of games, it has that distinctive sound, but some people might not like those sounds, they might sound a little bit annoying to some. I personally think it really fits the whole art style to have that sound design being like the old games. Then another pro is the replayability. There's a lot of replayability in the game. And some people may not like the idle, endless repeatability whoop kind of games, but for those people maybe that's not the right game. So you have to decide if that's your type of playstyle. But I really personally think if you enjoy semi-idle playstyle roguelike games, that's it. This game is so unique that there are just so many things it's doing differently. Another pro in my opinion is the craft system and the town management system, another pro, and the artifact system, another pro in my opinion, and being able to keep those artifacts. And then when you take when you take things like the combat, where your hero is fighting, you're not doing the combat yourself. Some people might like it, some people may not like it and consider it a con. Again, it's very specific based on the tastes of some people. For me, there are barely any cons. For example, one con in this game for me is that I didn't have access to the encyclopedia until I unlocked the Intel Center, and then it didn't tell me what Orb of Expansion is called, and I saw it required to craft certain buildings, but I didn't know what this is called, how do I get it, what sort of thing is this, and then until I built that Intel Center I couldn't realize what this thing is and how I obtain it. So this is something that maybe was overlooked, but in general there aren't that many cons in that game in my opinion. The Necromancer seems a little bit too strong, but it's not completely overpowered, and every hero can be very strong if you build it the right way with the right stats, right traits and items. And I think that's pretty much a summary of my pros and cons. If I remember something else I might write it as a comment additionally. To get notified when I upload more content for this game or other games like this one, which would be wooters of all varieties, isometric, third-person ARPGs, wooter shooters and all sorts of wooters like that, you could subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on my content updates. And optionally, you can even join as a member of the Struck Club on YouTube as a channel member to get access to exclusive perks such as special emotes custom made by me, special badges custom made by me that represents how many months you have been a member for, as well as opt-in of editing tutorials that I can give for Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, as well as shoutouts and things like that. And I would like to use this part of the video to thank all my YouTube members and Twitch subscribers. Thank you for supporting the channel and keeping me going. Thank you also for watching this video, everyone. Keep it cool, struck up until next time, and goodbye.